Hello, welcome to Off the Shelf Reviews.
I want my cake.
And I'm Gary. And today we're going to review and discuss Creepshow, which came out in 1982, written by Stephen King and directed by George A. Romero. Ian, why don't you give us the synopsis?
Well, the story follows a little boy called Billy, who's just got his hands on a copy of Creepshow the comic book. When it's taken away by his dad, played by Tom Atkins, the creeper appears to Billy during the night and tells him a host of tales of scariness.
This is going to be extremely painful, Mr. Romero.
So this is a horror anthology movie that's been clearly inspired by horror comics such as The Vault of Horror and Tales from the Crypt and The Haunt of Fear and many, many others like it. And of course, George A. Romero and Stephen King were pretty good friends. You know, they were almost best friends, and they always wanted to work with each other.
Yeah.
And they thought that Creepshow would be the perfect film for them to collaborate and work. And of course, then to be inspired by all of those horror comics that they would have enjoyed growing up that influenced them and their careers as well.
Yeah, this film's a bit of a classic, isn't it? You know, if you have to be unknown in the horror genre to not know what Creepshow is.
For sure.
And I came a little bit late into Creepshow. Like, it came out in 82. And then it probably wasn't even until 92, 93 that I actually managed to get a hold of and watch Creepshow. But I'd seen loads of horror anthology tale movies like it before. A lot of them had been shown on BBC One late at night, kind of. I think it's not Hammer Horror. I think it's like Atticus Productions or something. You know, they had Peter Cushing sitting there telling five people who mysteriously don't know each other how they're all intertwined. And I remember seeing Creepshow 2 before seeing Creepshow, and specifically remember the raft story.
That is probably my favourite anthology horror movie short of all anthology movies, because it was so well done.
Yeah, and it was the one that was most well known. And like you and Jez, you both did Necronomicon, you know, which came later in the 90s, but I didn't even hear that one until you guys did it. So there's so many different horror anthology.
I honestly think horror anthology movies never do very well.
No.
It was only Creepshow. Like, for me, Creepshow
Yeah.
is the king of anthology horror movies. And I think it also comes down to when they released this film, because it was originally slated for a summer release.
Yeah.
But the studio got wind that the October of that year, Halloween 3 Season of the Witch was going to be the October movie.
Ooh.
But the studio behind Creepshow got wind that it was going to be a Michael Myers-less movie. And so they were like, that's not going to do very well. Let's move Creepshow to towards the Halloween slot.
Yes.
And of course, Creepshow did incredibly well.
Yeah.
Because, well, Halloween 3, as you know, didn't.
Yeah. But 2 hours long. I didn't realize this as well. Like, for whenever I think of Creepshow, I think, oh, it's short, you know, about an hour and a half, sit down, tales go really quickly. But I feel as well that lets Creepshow down, in my opinion, is its length.
Well, there are 5 stories plus a wraparound story.
Yeah.
So you've almost got 6 stories in this film. So yeah. But I always say, though, if you're watching an anthology movie, a horror one, you know, not all the stories will get your attention, but then there's always the next one. And granted, you know, you could stop the film after one of those stories. But yeah, 2 hours, I do agree, felt a little bit too long for this one.
See, it works as well because, you know, they also came out with Tales from the Crypt, the TV show after this, Tales from the Dark Side, you know, we'd have Twilight Zone. So these little episodes work really well. But in this one, like we said, we get Tom Atkins at the start. He's a nasty piece of work.
Well, he is in this, especially as he's beating up Stephen King's own son.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's slapping him around with a comic book. He's like, how dare you read this trash? You'll read more sophisticated stuff. Now get to bed.
It's like, oh, okay, Dad, calm down. You know, you want to traumatize the child. Just give him the comic book. Because giving him a slap before bed. and then Billy, who... I love the fact that he's called Joe King.
Yeah.
You know, I sat there, I was looking on Wiki, I was like, nah, it must be a joke. He can't be called Joe King. No, he's called Joe King. His name's Joe King. Okay.
It said it is actually Stephen King's son, who's now a successful author and director in his own right.
Yeah. And he sat there in bed, and we see this mannequin of teeth just grinning at the window, you know. And I'm like, it's so... The creeper is real. It's come to Billy's aid, you know, to seek revenge on his dad. But now the tales are there just to kind of keep us in. And we hit the first one just running Father's Day. Your atypical group of strangers. Well, not strangers. This is actually family.
Yeah.
You know, but they don't speak at all. They stay away from each other because their family is like that. But they always come together once a year on Father's Day.
Ed Harris is our kind of gateway character into this family because it's his first time ever coming to this family gathering, and they're explaining to him why they come here every Father's Day.
Yeah.
And we get the flashback of the grumpy old father who's demanding his cake.
What do you think I've got you here for?
Yeah. You know, Father Nathan just sat there demanding his cake. A scary image. And before we get too far into it, I do love how Creepshow jumps from scene to scene.
Oh, in the comic book format.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There are many images, and the cinematography and the lighting and so many of these shots make it look like it's come right out of a comic book. So it's not just the framing, but it's the entire presentation.
Yeah.
And we'll see later in some of the episodes where it goes into complete comic book backgrounds for the characters.
Yeah.
You know, and it looks really surreal, but it really works in this format.
Yeah, it's just to keep that little child in you going that, you know, this is a scary tale, but it's okay. It's not real. And the family discuss about how the father was killed by his daughter. And we see the daughter driving up in her car. You know, she looks like she's had a few before she's got in the car. She's sitting there just smoking on a big cigar. And the daughter, it's revealed to us, killed her father in a fit of rage because he had revealed that he'd killed her boyfriend so that she would stay at home and look after him. And I've seen Creepshow a lot, but I'm like, oh, a what? And, you know, I'm kind of also taken a little bit back by Ed Harris's dance.
Oh, he's doing the disco dancing.
Like, this is Mr. You stepped into the wrong shower, motherfucker. And look at him shaking those hips. And the sister the sister or the daughter goes to her father's grave, and she reveals about how she killed him, and she made it look like a murder. Oh, she made it look like an accident, sorry, so nobody knows it's a murder. And she drops her bottle of whiskey.
Or Jim Beam.
Yeah. Now, we'd heard the father kind of talking already.
Yeah.
To her, and I thought, well, that's all in her head.
For sure, yeah.
But then when she drops her whiskey and the hand jumps out of the grave, I'm like, is it the whiskey?
I don't know. I don't usually drink whiskey in a cemetery. But, you know, never spill your Jim Beam in a graveyard.
No. Because the father comes to life, or comes to undead life, I suppose, and kills the daughter.
He starts demanding his cake.
And the story... Like, one of the issues, like I said, is some of the stories in Creepshow seem to go on for too long. And this story is... I'm trying to work it out after the 6th or 7th time of watching it, of the father's come back to life to seek revenge on the family because he was an evil bastard.
Yeah, there's no real morality tale in this one.
No.
It's just a case of this is happening.
It's
just the horror.
We're following Ed Harris. Like, he's new to this family, but he
wanders out for
outside.
a cigarette and ends up, hearing or seeing something in the graveyard. And again, it's beautifully presented like a comic book. And he ends up falling into the empty grave. And we see the tombstone kind of shuffling or sliding towards him. And he's paralyzed.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, if I move, it'll crush me.
But if I don't move...
maybe it won't crush me.
Me.
But we see it continue to slide towards him, but he looks up and sees the zombie, and he still just lays there and dies. So, oh.
Bye, Ed.
Never mind.
Yeah, and then the zombie makes his way into the house, and after taking out the maid, he then kills the second oldest sister, snaps her neck. You know, he's still demanding his cake. And as my wife said as we were watching this, somebody give him his goddamn cake.
Right.
You know, because she's like, that's the only way you're going to stop him. And you have the brother and the sister who are obnoxious and living off welfare, I suppose. And you're supposed to hate them. But at this point, I'm like, I should feel good that they got out of underneath him and should warn them that there's this killer ghoul walking around. And he emerges from the kitchen with the sister's head upside down, with the candles on top of her head, so happy that he's found his cake that I'm like, what the fuck?
The end.
The effects, I mean, alone from Tom Savini are just enough to keep you enraptured on the story.
I honestly, I mean, I know I'm not being a bit nitpicky, but of all of Tom Savini's effects, this zombie ghoul doesn't look that good.
Yeah.
I mean, at least the jaw movement was kind of there, but it literally looked like a mask. It didn't feel real.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm nitpicking. I just didn't like it that much compared to the other zombie effects we know he could do.
Yeah, yeah. The second story, the second story I feel is one of the stories that does drag out a bit, but I'll get to the other one later as well. And that's the lonesome death of Jordy, written and starring Stephen King, and it tells the tale of a hillbilly bumpkin living at his farm, and how an asteroid crashes into his field, and the Jordy, who lives on his own and must live miles away from anywhere else, kind of touches this alien asteroid and is infected or mutated by the alienness of this asteroid into a plant thing.
Exactly. This short story is literally only about 10 minutes long.
Yeah.
And it feels very inspired by H.P. Lovecraft's Color Out of Space.
Totally, yes.
And yeah, we soon realised with like the green lights and then the mist outside as all of this vegetation starts to grow, and he realises it's on his fingers at first.
He touches it.
He burnt
he?
himself on it at first. But for me, this short story's comedy is in the way he plays the character. This stumbling, stupid person.
Yeah.
But for me, it's the comedy sketches where he has his fantasies, and he imagines himself making all this money. You know, it cuts to this dream of him going to this scientist and selling his asteroid, and all the money being counted out. But then he cools down the asteroid and it breaks in half.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, this meteor is shit. I'm not going to get any money for this now. And then he has the fantasy of him not making any money. But then he also has the dream sequence now that he's realized that his fingers are infected, that the doctor's probably going to cut his arm off.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, I can't do that. And so he just gets absolutely shit-faced drunk.
And sits there and watches wrestling.
Yeah.
But this is the thing, like I have masses of respect for Stephen King and all of the work that he's given us over the years. Fingers crossed nothing untoward pops out. Joss Whedon. But I can't help but watch him in this whole story and think that he is high as fuck on cocaine.
Yeah. This is the 80s Stephen King.
This is the 80s Stephen King. This is pre-Maximum Overdrive Stephen King. This is Stephen King like, I can do anything. I'm a god. And so when you see his expressions of him looking at the camera or acting with his fingers or talking to himself, it's absolutely, it is brilliant. But like I said, for me, there's a part of the story where I'm just like, does it fit here in Creepshow?
Oh, absolutely.
And is it the other story that I'll get to that makes the film too long? But just watching him, slowly become greener and greener until it gets like it spreads. The alien goo seeps into his field, and then it spreads into the surrounding ground. It starts to spread all over the house, all over his TV, and he has that dream, doesn't he, where his body is itching from it being covered in this green stuff, and so he fills up his bath, and his father from beyond the grave, like where, just says to him, look, Jordy, you don't want to do that.
Water spreads it.
Water will spread it. And he's like, well, I can't help myself. And then he just kind of throws himself into the bath, and it soothes him. But when he wakes up, he's just now Moss Man.
Yeah. But it's like, this is one of my most memorable sequences from the film, when you just see the Moss Man in the corner shuffling, and he grabbing the shotgun and aiming it to his head, and he's like, oh, I hope I don't miss. Like, all of my life I've had the worst luck ever.
B-A-D luck. Yeah.
And yeah, it's really sad to watch him blow his moss off. And but then it's that haunting ending as well, where it pans back and we hear the news broadcast saying, like, heavy storms are heading in, expect lots of rain, and we can see the infection spreading across the land. It's like, oh man, that's a game over scenario there.
Well, it's kind of deep, isn't it, to think that, like, there'll be that one person at the start of the apocalypse who will die and nobody will know.
Yeah, and then it's too late.
After that, millions will die, but that'll be that one guy, and he only wanted to make some money. The third story, I think, is the one story for Creepshow 1 that really stands out for me, that I'll always remember, and it's called Something to Tide You Over. And the story basically follows an evil Leslie Nielsen. And that's how old this film is, that you have to realise that at one point Leslie Nielsen was the bad guy.
Right.
He's that good of an actor. He went from bad guy to comedian. And then you've got Ted Danson, who looks really young.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Like, super, like, pre-Cheers days. And it turns out that Richard, Leslie Nielsen's character, has come to Harry and found out that Harry is having an affair with Richard's wife, Becky, played by Galen Ross. Galen Ross, Dawn of the Dead. Yeah. I've seen Creepshow like 6 or 7 times. I never realised it was Galen Ross.
Right.
Because you don't really see her that much. They have this discussion about, how, Leslie Nielsen has captured her, and, he'll take Ted Danson to see her. But what he's actually done is he's buried her up to her neck in the beach sand of his beach house. And he's just set up a camera and he's recording the tide come in. And he's just going to watch her drown. And then he forces Ted Danson into a similar type position, forces him into the grave, puts the sand up to his neck and sets up a camera for him. And it's like, this is like Leslie Nielsen's Saw.
Right, yeah. It's like, well, hopefully you can hold your breath, hold your breath when the tide comes in. You get to breathe when it goes back out, and maybe you'll be fine. It's like, what?
No!
He gives them the illusion that there's a chance to survive this.
Yeah, I love the fact as well. It's like, I could shoot you. Okay, I'll get in the pit. I'm like, no, shoot me.
Right, yeah. At least wrestle or tumble for the gun, maybe you'll have a chance. But here, no. You're like, no.
Yeah.
But yeah, he ends up, Leslie Nielsen drives off home. He gets into his house, he sits in his bed and he just turns his monitors on and he's just watching them. He's just drowning.
Yeah.
It's like,
his wife and her lover, and it's.
But the thing is, we see the tide come in, and we see he's got the TV set up in front of them, right, and the VCR or the power generator behind them. I'm like, how is that camera getting this camera feed? How are you recording this?
Yeah, you don't question any of the electricity, because you're watching Ted Danson watch Galen Ross, on hers, and the tide comes in and blows the TV out. And I'm like,
I didn't see any camera and tripod there either.
That was not really how that would work. But the suspense is played in really, really well.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the way that Nielsen delivers his evil character and Danson tries to play this innocent hero, and Galen Ross is there screaming, while the water's lapping up against her face. But once the tide goes over Ted Danson's head and you see him underwater,
and that's a great visual. Was hair floating?
Well, I was reading up on the notes, and there's one area that Jordy Romero always swear in America that he would just work in. I think it's Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he would just always want to film there. So they filmed the entire Creepshow around this abandoned all-girls school. As much as they could from location shots. So this shot of Ted Danson is actually a fish tank,
right,
that he's got his head into, and they've got the scuba tank and they've gotten him some air, and then they pulled the thing out and gone, go. And then filmed that shot and then cut and then pulled him out of the way. And I'm like, wow, that's Jorge Romero to a T.
Right.
We just use what we've got around us to get it. But Leslie Nielsen's character wakes up the next morning, goes out to the beach, realizes that the bodies are gone. and that he just pulls up the TVs and the cameras to get rid of the evidence, and he heads back to his place, and we start to see footprints walk up from the sea. And it is the age-old revenge story. I think this is kind of what the first one could have been. Is, you know, two people who have been killed, I suppose, by the bad guy, and they're coming back for revenge.
Yeah.
You know, I think the effects of them looking drowned.
I thought they were pretty effective.
Yeah.
Again, they looked like better zombies than the one from the first
The
segment.
first one, yeah.
You know, covered in the seaweed. You know, they got that green look to them, and yeah, they've come in for their revenge, and basically. You know, they chase Leslie off into his bedroom, but I was just like, he closes the door and you're like, they're already in the room.
Yeah.
You know that when the camera reveals. Again, we get that comic book look of Leslie Nielsen as he's panicking, and then next thing we know, he is buried, you know, up to the neck in sand, screaming, I can hold my breath for a very long time.
It's like, bye, Frank.
Yeah.
The fourth tale, I think, is up there for being one of my favourite ones, and it's called The Crate. Basically, we follow how Holbrook, playing Henry, whose obnoxious, horrible wife, played by the amazing Adrienne Barbeau, he's constantly having fantasies about how he can get rid of her.
Oh, those are probably my favourite segments of the film.
Yeah.
He really despises her, but he's got no backbone to get out of this relationship. Like, he completely needs her. And she just is so abusive towards him and so horrible. Yeah. But, like, it's all dialed up to 11, so it's fun.
I kind of imagine, like, because I remember reading somewhere that I think Adrienne Barbeau and John Carpenter got together back in the day.
Yes.
For a little while. And so I kind of imagine, like, that's how their relationship could have been like, God damn it, John, you can't make a film to save your life, you know, and he's like, yo, bitch, and shoots her right in the face, and everyone's just like, thank you. Like when those people clap at the party after he blows her and shoots her in the face. You're like, oh wow, everybody kind of gets in on it as well. But yeah, she belittles him, and yet at the same time there's a hint of, like, she knows he needs her. Yeah. He can't do anything for himself. And then the story follows his friend, who another professor that he works with, who I think was trying to get off with a girl at the party that looked a little bit out of his age range.
Yeah.
Or I'm not judging, but he's a college professor and she might have been a student. I don't know. But this college professor gets called back to the college because a janitor has found this crate underneath the stairs and doesn't know what to do with it.
It was a very cool nod to John Carpenter's The Thing there.
Yeah.
With the date and the Antarctic written on there.
And it does say Julia Carpenter on it.
That was where it was supposed to be forwarded to.
Yeah. I was like, oh, nice. And this crate, like, nobody knows anything about it. There's no evidence. And so the professor and the janitor end up pulling it out and opening it up to have a look. And you just know anything underneath the stairs, which has got two massive chains on it, shouldn't just be opened willy-nilly.
Well, the janitor finds out that straight away when he sticks his arm into the crate. And then the crate gets turned over and breaks open, and we see this creature pull him up into the darkness.
My God, did you know they called it Fluffy the Crate Monster?
Yes, yeah.
Fluffy.
Well, believe it or not, going back to John Carpenter's The Thing again, Tom Savini had never worked on animatronic puppets or creatures before.
Wow.
So he had to get onto the phone and he called up Rob Bottin.
Oh, yes.
And went, how did you do all of those animatronic effects in The Thing? Because I've got to do this Fluffy thing.
And Rob Bottin's like, well, dude.
Yeah. So yeah, another nod there to The Thing.
The creature itself, like, you only get really quick glances.
And it's just fur and teeth.
Yeah, but the impression you get is like, do not go near this box. It's just, you know, especially from the professor himself. He's a great actor conveying just the terror of seeing or hearing the janitor getting devoured. And when he runs off, he gets another college student and brings him back. And the creature has actually got out the crate and pushed the crate back underneath the stairs.
Yeah.
It's like, that's great. I love that idea.
So the college student's just like, what, have you been drinking? Like, we're not going to the authorities with this nonsense story. I'll go see for myself. And he sees the shoe and he's like measuring it and he's like, oh, we can tell what kind of creature it is by the bite marks.
Yeah.
But then the creature's like, you're not taking that shoe, that's my shoe. Rips out, gouges at his face. You see this incredibly gory shot. It's pretty nasty as it bites a chunk out of him and then smashes his face against the wall. God. His eyes peeling, is dropping out, the gore mark. I was like, that's probably the goriest and most remarkable death sequence in the whole of Creepshow.
Yeah. Like, it's the level of blood they threw into this one, like, kind of makes up for the lack of it in the others. But, for me as well, like, I'm here in the fourth story, and as a anthology fan, I know that we should be finishing the story and then wrapping up. But, we've still got one more story to go and to wrap up. And everything is just put into this moment of him, the professor watching the college student get killed and racing back to Hal Holbrook's character and saying to him, like, dude, seriously, there's this box with this thing. It's killed 2 people. I don't know what the fuck to do. And Henry's like, I tell you what, have a drink. I'm going to call the wife.
I'll send her to investigate.
I'll help. And he knocks out the professor. Henry puts him to sleep and then convinces the wife, Billy, to meet him at the college and gives her this story. After cleaning up all the blood and trying to get rid of as much evidence as he can of anything bad, he says to her, like, my buddy, the professor, well, he might have gone a little bit too far with one of the female students. And she's underneath the stairs. Could you give me a hand? And Adrienne Barbeau, she runs a really good character of not wanting to be there, but at the same time, I don't know, there's this thing that her and Henry get to now work with. His friend is a complete utter douchebag, and she's going to help put him up into prison. And he forces her underneath the stairs. Hal Holbrook is laughing his ass off.
Oh yeah,
the whole time.
I mean, he's seen all the blood and debris, so he's got no reason to doubt his friend at this moment.
he's just happy to get rid of his wife, like.
But yeah, she's just like, you're terrible in bed. You're a horrible, boring person. And then then Fluffy gets her.
Fluffy gets her good. and he once Fluffy's dealt with Billy, he takes the crate, puts it on the back of his truck, drives it out to this quarry and gets rid of it, just throws it into the lake, and then tells his buddy the next morning, like, well, who's gonna know? The evidence is all gone, there's no bodies, it's just us, isn't it? Kind of implying to his friend, like, I'm braver than you, I'll kill you if you say anything. And then you realise that the creature itself has escaped.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, awesome!
And
then we go into tale 5. And yeah, like I said, by this point I'm like, oh man, because this story just kind of entails a rich kind of philanthropist, kind of, he's E.G. Marshall, who's playing this guy, and he's locked himself in his apartment.
He's a complete germaphobe.
Yeah.
He's a horrible piece of work. And, we can piece those bits together by the few people that call him and the way that he treats other people.
I suppose that's really good that the actor is able to convey this character to us with only tiny little bits of dialogue conveyed to people off screen.
Yeah. And
just the environment is. That is, I'll go online and say, yeah, that is top notch. But the story itself is just generally nothing. Like, we know he's a bad guy, and we kind of want the ending to happen. Yeah. And after the amazing goriness of the crate, I now got this long-winded story.
It's not very long-winded. I mean, again, this is only another 10-minute, kind of 15-minute segment. So it doesn't really, for me, outstay its welcome. It's the fact that it's now the 5th story, though, after all these other ones. And I don't know if they necessarily saved the best for last.
Yeah.
But they definitely saved the most expensive segment for last.
Really?
Because as we see him spraying cockroaches, he's got an infestation, and obviously him being a germaphobe, we can see by the incredibly sterile hospital-like kind of, accommodation that he lives in.
Yeah.
That when we see the thousands upon thousands of cockroaches emerging, which is of course what's driving him insane, The production had to buy those cockroaches.
Oh, fucking hell.
And it was 50 cents a cockroach.
What?
So they racked up a
expensive
budget,
cockroaches.
I believe, of $250,000 on cockroaches.
Cockroaches alone. Shit, you could have just got one. Don't they breed like 1 million times? You could have just got 2, and then we'll come back in 6 weeks.
Well, no, they had to film this like tomorrow.
Yeah, true, yeah. But this is the thing. Like, I'm not interested in this story, his character, or where it's going to go, because I know where it's going to go.
We just want to see his comeuppance, really.
Yeah, really. You know, he hides out in this room. The cockroaches make their way into and invade his room, and he thinks he's gotten away from them. But after the other 4 stories, we know you're not getting away from these things. And he gets overwhelmed by the cockroaches. And we do get a cool kind of, like, there's a mannequin effect of the actor's body prosthetic there, and then we see thousands of cockroaches coming out of his corpse and filling up the room, which I suppose if you're absolutely terrified by cockroaches, it could make you vomit and scare.
Yeah, creepy crawlies, bugs, cockroaches. Yeah, if you're squeamish, then it's going to be nightmare fuel for sure.
But by this point in the film, I'm like, that you kind of let me down a bit, Creepshow. That one could have... Like I said, either that one or the Stephen King one I could easily get rid of. I could keep the Stephen King one because of where it's placed.
The only one I would get rid of is the first segment. That's, for me, was the weakest one.
Ed Harris
dancing to disco, though. Yeah, it's hard. Like, there's a place for all of these, I believe.
But we still got to go for the ending as well. I mean, you know, the stories end and Tom Atkins wakes up the next morning and has a bit of a pain in his neck. We do see a familiar face as one of the garbage men picks up the Creepshow comic book and starts reading it. Tom Savini there. And Billy has purchased himself a voodoo doll. And it plays into the motif of those comic books where you had the x-ray glasses and the invisible ink and the voodoo doll. And if you actually buy it from Creepshow, it does actually work. Yay!
Ready for another shot, Dad?
Well, Ian, what were your favourite scenes from the film? And, of course, your favourite segment?
I did really like Ed Harris dancing in the first one, even though the story itself isn't great. And if you try to think about it too much like I did, you'd be like, it doesn't even make sense. You know, why is he coming back to life? Like you said, the special effect of the zombie is all right. It's not the best zombie makeup I've ever seen, but it plays well for that. I think my favourite segment, like, I really do like Stephen King as well, acting like a bumbling bumpkin in the second one, but the story... Leslie Nielsen as the madman and Ted Danson is great in the third one. I suppose my absolute favourite story has to be The Crate, simply because of the whole, you know, man-wife marriage idea. How do I get rid of this? Here's this killer creature that just eats everything. Yeah, gore.
Yeah. I think my favourite segment would probably be the Stephen King segment. I just love the stupid humour, the visuals. That was just, it was really goofy and really fun. Yeah. I guess memorable scenes though would include the head twist break off.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Jordy's eventual suicide, Ted Danson's head underwater, Charlie's death in the crate, him being eaten and his head being smashed.
A lot of head
and all of the cockroaches bursting out of the corpse. Yeah, those are my memorable sequences. Well, Ian, do you recommend Creepshow?
I do, but I think it's testament to Creepshow actually that the first one is, I find it's all right, but I much prefer the second one, and I've never watched the third one.
Don't.
Yeah, that's the warning I get, so I don't. There are many really, really good horror anthologies out there. To name them all would take ages, but Creepshow is the one you should always go to and watch, and then not watch the others to on par with it or to compare, but just to accept that, you know, you've got this one and then you've got that one and then you've got this from this timeline and that timeline. Leslie Nielsen is worthy enough to watch this just because of his manic his manic character style. The fact that you've got Jordy Romero and Stephen King, you know, together with Tom Savini in just one production, yeah, it's worth it alone.
Hell yeah. That's why that makes this a really easy recommendation. It's an absolute must-watch for horror fans, as it brings Jorge Romero, Stephen King, and Tom Savini together to tell nightmarish stories in an anthology format in an incredibly fun way. Each chapter has a different tone and feel, and it borrows from many iconic horror genres and melds them together in a comic book format. Some tales are really silly, including Stephen King acting like Wile E. Coyote, and Leslie Nielsen, chewing up the scenery, but in a good way. While you have truly horrific images of hundreds of thousands of cockroaches crawling over everything, and college students coming to a grisly end. This anthology has something for everyone, and if one story doesn't get you, the next one surely will. Tom Savini did some great makeup work, including the animatronic fluffy crate monster, to the zombies coming back for revenge. It's well shot, edited, and the comic book framing keeps the film feeling comical despite the macabre nature. This is a classic, a real must-watch, along with its sequel and subsequent late TV series, especially if you enjoy some tongue-in-cheek horror, and all of these tales work on repeat viewings time and again. Thoroughly entertaining and damn good fun. Thanks for watching Off the Shelf Reviews.